Thank you very much. I just want to clarify, do you think President Trump's tone changed because of you? Is it possible that you achieved this shift during your meeting with him? And did he speak about a special operation? Or did you share details of a special operation you intend to carry out?
What special operation? What are you referring to?
Did you tell him about specific operations or speak more generally? Did you share details about your goals and plans? What changed his perception of Ukraine's capabilities? Because his tone has changed dramatically.
Indeed, I shared with him a certain vision. That is true. I spoke about the realities on the battlefield and about what could potentially happen. I believe there is an impact on Russia, and we should not expect soft gestures from Russia toward Ukraine. Accordingly, Ukraine must respond with appropriate actions toward Russia. We should not be afraid of this. And we should not be overly cautious in our rhetoric when Russians issue threats. I believe that civilized nations should adopt the same tone. To remain civilized when facing those who act in an uncivilized manner, in my view, is a significant mistake, both in terms of rhetoric and in the concrete, substantive actions that must be taken. As for the battlefield and even deeper into the territory of the Russian Federation, if Russia sets the deliberate goal of creating a complete blackout in Ukraine, a goal it pursues every single winter, I am not convinced that our response, nor the response of our partners, should be any different or any less decisive. Russia must clearly and unequivocally understand that civilized countries fundamentally differ from barbaric ones in that they never initiate acts of aggression and never strike first under any circumstances. But that does not mean they are weak. And weakness must not be shown. If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin must know that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia. That is, briefly, about some of the points we discussed with the President. There are details about what is happening on our battlefield. There are many different aspects. There are programs used by United States intelligence, including systems also used by our military, such as Delta, for example. Let me give you an example. The Delta program records where the enemy has entered. It does not specify that a sabotage and reconnaissance group has entered. It does not say that these soldiers entered and were later eliminated. It simply marks the location they entered. And immediately, there is a perception that the area is occupied. But it is not occupied. This is the nature of war, unfortunately. People entered, perhaps 3 to 5 individuals, and by evening they were already eliminated. But in the United States of America, by that same evening, President Trump has shown that another village in Ukraine has been occupied. That is how it happens. I simply want to explain how this works. By the way, this is not unique to him. It happens with other European leaders and even within our own society. People see a map shaded in a certain color and assume that area is occupied. But it is not. There is enemy presence, and that presence will be eliminated. Our soldiers will reclaim those positions. It is important to understand that this is not an advantage, as the Russians portray it to their own population and abroad. No, it is not even a success. These are temporary forces. Temporary, because their time will certainly run out once the armed forces of Ukraine take the necessary steps. These are just some of the nuances. I gave you one example involving programs and data. There are many such nuances. Addressing them requires not just minutes or hours, but several meetings. And I hold these meetings with leaders, including the President of the United States of America. Today, I strongly and firmly believe that this is one of the most important reasons behind the noticeable and significant shift in rhetoric. a deepening distrust toward President Putin, a much clearer and more realistic understanding of the harsh realities on the battlefield, a strengthened and more determined belief in Ukraine's cause, and the Russians' persistent and blatant disrespect toward everyone, including the President of the United States of America himself. I believe these are the key reasons.
Final question, please. NHK, I believe?
Thanks. I am Mayoshi from NHK, the Japanese broadcasting company. President Trump stated on social media that he met with you and said that Ukraine can reclaim all of its territory lost since the beginning of the war, with the support it receives. However, achieving this remains difficult, especially when it comes to reducing energy dependence on Russia, as you have mentioned. What are you demanding from European countries? Do you believe they can secure and provide the kind of support President Trump is referring to in relation to Europe?
Thank you for the question. Russia is currently facing economic challenges. These challenges do exist. However, Russia will not complain because it has a substantial amount of cash. Everyone understands this. They possess large reserves of money in various formats. The primary and most significant source of budget revenue for Russia is its energy resources, specifically the large-scale sale of natural gas and oil. Europe, in one form or another, through various countries, not directly but via intermediaries, continues to receive energy resources from the Russian Federation. As a result, Russia continues to export large amounts of energy and receive substantial amounts of money in return, which it then spends exclusively on sustaining and escalating its war efforts. Why exclusively on war? Because we do not see any increase in social support within Russia. That means all of this money is being directed toward warfare. If there is a shortage of funds for war, there will be a reduction in social support for the Russian population. If social support declines, public dissatisfaction will grow, and the Russian leadership will also become unstable. Historically, Russia has always changed through uprisings driven by hunger. I will not speculate on the direction of such change, but it is certain that leadership has shifted in those moments. That is why they fear this outcome. Europe must stop all forms of supply. Yes, there are risks, we understand that. Alternative logistics may be more expensive. But a solution must be found to halt the purchase of energy resources from any country that ultimately sources them from Russia. In this regard, I fully support the United States of America. Absolutely. Because we are directly affected. I believe Europe must take a closer look at these drones, at all the threats and intimidation coming from Russia. Europe must also recognize these threats and signals. It would be quite strange and illogical if they continued importing energy resources from the Russian Federation despite the ongoing conflict and all the clear evidence against such dependence. For example, drones have reached our Nordic partners. Where did they come from? Anyone can easily sit down, open a map, and clearly understand the most likely origin, if those drones are indeed of Russian origin. One plausible and concerning possibility is the continued and deliberate use of the Russian Federation's naval fleet, systematically navigating through and exploiting the waterways of our European friends and partners for strategic advantage. So when we talk about a truly comprehensive solution, it is not just about energy alone. It is also about addressing the issue of the shadow fleet, and more broadly, about effectively halting Russia's ability to trade and export goods by sea. That is another critical step, reducing Russia's economic capacity. Yes, we are discussing this with Slovakia and Hungary, but it is not only about those two countries. Slovakia and Hungary have had direct contracts with Russia for various energy supplies. But there are other countries involved, countries that either receive energy resources or refined energy products, or accept payments from Russia for the logistics of energy deliveries to other nations. We have spoken many times about sanctions. If we are talking about energy sanctions against Russia, then let us truly talk about energy sanctions against Russia. Not occasionally but consistently. Without exceptions, without unnecessary conditions, completely and comprehensively. If we are talking about the banking sector, about the shadow fleet, there is a list. There are 500 vessels. Yes, 500. Sanctions must be imposed on them, legal sanctions, physical sanctions targeting the crews, the captains, and so forth. That is how this can be stopped. Yes, Russia will face a major deficit. In the year 2026, Russia's defense budget was reduced by 50 billion. They will find that 50 billion because they have more money in their pockets. More money.